Wonderful. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today for our member workshop hosted by the World Education Services, WES. My name is Jennifer O'Donnell. I'm one of the senior managers of the membership engagement team here at the Toronto Region Board of Trade. As we begin, I acknowledge the land that is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Our offices are located on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations who believe in intergenerational responsibility for our well-being of today and tomorrow. We have just a few housekeeping announcements before we begin. I'd ask everyone, if you feel comfortable, turn on your camera. It's always easier to present speaking to individuals, but if you're not in a position to do that, we completely appreciate that. Settle in, feel free to turn off your cell phones and ringers. And lastly, we'll be taking questions at the end of the presentation. We have a Q&A segment. However, I would encourage everyone to add your questions as the presentation goes along. That way it spurs conversation. You might be thinking something similar to another individual, and it's just a really great way to start having dialogues of the content that's being discussed today. Enough of me talking, let's get started. Today, we are joined by several experts who will enhance your knowledge in assessing credentials and skills to help you recruit, hire, and maintain immigrant talent. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Helen Seibert-Woodall, Senior Program and Policy Advisor from WES. Helen?
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. As Jennifer introduced, my name is Helen Seibert-Woodall. I'm the Senior Program Policy Advisor. On behalf of WES, I would like to thank the Toronto Region Board of Trade for helping us organize this workshop. As an immigrant myself, I believe that today's topic is so important and timely, and I'm so pleased and honored to be moderating this session. For those of you who are not familiar with WES, please allow me to say a few introductory words. WES is a nonprofit social enterprise dedicated to advancing the economic and social integration of immigrants, refugees, and international students in the US and Canada. WES has been a global leader in academic credential services for nearly 50 years. And in addition to credential evaluation, we also do social impact work through policy, programming, and philanthropy. As Jennifer introduced, we will have some presentations, and we will also have time for Q&A. But before we proceed with the presentations, please allow me to set some context to guide our conversation. As you can see on this slide, and as you may know, several factors are reshaping the current labor market landscape. When we look at our demographics, we have low birth rate and aging population. By 2030, nearly 5 million Canadians are expected to retire. So this means that there will be fewer young people to replace them, and immigration will be the key drive for labor force growth. We also know the current labor shortage crisis across so many sectors. In the first quarter of this year, over 800,000 job vacancies were reported, and majority of the job vacancies were in healthcare and social assistance, where we see a large number of newcomers, immigrants, and refugees. And the unemployment rate is going up, which is currently 5.2%. I don't have to explain how technology and AI are impacting the labor force landscape. In the next 10 to 15 years, it's expected that AI will affect up to half of all Canadian jobs, which will necessarily impact the skills required in the labor market. The COVID pandemic is also another factor which is changing the labor force landscape, including digitization of the workforce. Also, as a nation, we are competing with other jurisdictions such as Germany, Australia, and UK who are competing for new talents. Given all these new trends, more than ever, immigration is so crucial to address the chronic labor shortage crisis and drive Canada's economy. That's why the government of Canada continued to increase the number of newcomers each year. As you can see on this slide, this is the latest immigration levels plan announced by the federal government in November last year. And IRCC, the Ministry for Immigration, is planning to bring nearly 1.5 million newcomers over the next 3 years. And when we look at the different categories, almost 60% of new permanent residents will be admitted through economic pathways. So this means that there is no shortage of talented people who want to move to our country, Canada. And when we look at the profile of these newcomers, majority are young, highly educated and experienced, and they are ready to contribute to the labor market economy. This provides employers with a unique opportunity to employ immigrants who hold prior experience and knowledge without lots of training. So if we don't take advantage of this experience and skills of newcomers, there will be a huge loss for our country. According to the Conference Board of Canada study, as a nation, we may lose almost $25 billion in earnings due to underemployment and unemployment of newcomers. So today's workshop will highlight some innovative tools and strategies that will be helpful for employers in hiring global talent. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. First, we have Kevin Kamal, who is our Director for Institutional Client Relations. And Kevin will be speaking on international academic credentials assessment. Next, we have our colleague, Daniel Servangil, who is the Associate Director for Employer Initiatives. And Daniel will be sharing with us some innovative tools and strategies to hire global talent. Last but not least, we have Basil Rumley, who is the co-founder and director for economic mobility from Jumpstart Refugee Talent, which is one of our partners. And Basil will speak on solutions to the global talent crisis. Thank you so much. And now I'll pass it to Kevin. Kevin, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Helen, Jennifer, thank you so much for that introduction. And I will be speaking to our International Academic Credential Evaluation Services. The next year, you may want to know, we will be celebrating our 50th anniversary. Initially, we started in 1974 in New York City. From beginning, we were a not-for-profit organization, and we continue to have that kind of a business model for our operation. We really want to get to your section for your comments and your questions. So I'm going to kind of speak to a few of the highlights that it affects. It kind of highlights our Canadian operations. So you may want to know that in 2000, we started the Toronto office, and actually we started the business in Canada based on an RFP by the Ontario government, then the Ministry of Training, Colleges and University. So there was an RFP in 1999. WES was one of the respondents, and finally we got the contract to deliver this service in Ontario. And because of that RFP, we had the limited funding from the Ontario government, and in fact that funding lasted about 10 years. I think the next kind of a milestone in Canada is 2013, when we became a designated credential evaluation service provider for the federal government for immigration purpose. And when I say immigration, really it is, I'm speaking about the economic class immigrants who come to Canada based on point system. We are not used for family class and all of those other categories. And hopefully there will be time to explain this in comments and questions. I think the next milestone is 2018 in Canada, when we launched our WES Gateway program. This is still credential evaluation. However, it is addressing the needs of displaced individuals. And I will speak to this at the end of the session. I thought you will be interested in these data, really. Like, we are looking at the 2022 profile of our applicants. As you see, right, in both Canada and US, we assist very large number of applicants, over 400,000. And the data on US and Canada, they are kind of stark. You see that in US, we are mainly doing this credential evaluation for higher education purpose. That means international student, really international student getting admissions in the US. And in Canada, 84% of our applicants, our customers, are using us for immigration purpose. I really like the data on the other side of this slide. It is giving you kind of a picture of, okay, from that 300,000 in Canada that we assisted, where are they falling as far as the discipline, as far as program of studies? As you see, a large number, it is 25% business and management, 16% engineering or STEM, and 14% in healthcare and all of that. This data really became even more interesting to me yesterday when IRCC or federal government, for the first time, they had an express entry draw strictly focus on healthcare professionals. Although yesterday through express entry, they invited 500 individuals to apply or what they call ITA. From that 500, there were 35 separate healthcare occupations that they invited prospective candidates in the express entry to become permanent resident. It is these disciplines, these majors or specializations are going to be even more relevant as far as immigration trends. Again, yesterday, IRCC announced that next week, they may have their first draw for STEM category, that is engineering, science, and mathematics. So our services are used not just by employers, also by professional licensing bodies like the engineers, the CPAs, or the teachers, both at the elementary level and early childhood education. Also, we are used by universities and colleges for admitting either international students or immigrant students. You have heard this before, right? Very large number of immigrants, those who land in Canada as permanent resident, they will do continuing education to kind of establish their Canadian profile and Canadian experience. And of course, we are used by federal government for immigration purpose. And we are not the only one, by the way. There are 4 other services that IRCC has designated to provide this credential evaluation for immigration purpose. I thought you'll be interested to know, like, when we say employers are using our service, we'll give you kind of a selected list of employers who are using us in Ontario. And this is, again, strictly limited to Ontario, kind of segmented by private and public. I think generally you may say that we are most used by public sector. And there is a reason for that. Most public sector kind of entities, they have credentialing policy. They want to be transparent on their hiring process. They will require credential evaluation that just to make sure that everybody is competing at the same kind of a level or at the same kind of the entry level and all of that. Yes, normally we are used more by public sector, especially at the federal level for hiring purposes. We always look at the purpose of our operation. Really, the purpose is to facilitate recognition of international academic credentials. That is the purpose. That is the bottom line. Like, we believe we play a facilitative role. to facilitate the recognition of international academic credentials. And the real recognition is that in fact belongs to employers or belongs to professional licensing bodies. We play facilitative role, but when an employer hires someone, partly, not the whole thing, right? We know that partly because of the equivalency report we have provided, that is the recognition. And again, that is what I mean, that the true recognition belongs to employers, professional licensing bodies, and academic institutions. I think here it is good that I speak a little bit more about how we are used by employers. First, we are used for hiring purposes. Again, the job application or the job posting will indicate that there is a requirement, there's an education requirement, and when there is such a requirement, some employers will require credential evaluation. Another way we have been used by employers is for promotional opportunities. They may have existing staff who are internationally educated. And now there is a promotional opportunity in their company, in their organization, and they want to make sure everybody is competing on an equal footing. So they will ask the candidate to submit a credential evaluation from WES or perhaps from another service. A third and very interesting the kind of reason that we have been used by employers is for salary adjustments. In fact, I remember the very first few months that we started in Canada back in 2000, we were used by a major public sector entity, not for hiring purposes. They were using us to adjust the salary level for their existing employee if an employee provided what we call so-called positive Canadian academic equivalency. Some employers call this salary adjustment. I know in another province, actually, they refer to this as wage support. Again, the exercise is to make sure everyone, internationally educated or domestic educated, they are placed in a right grid for right salary level. Now I will speak to this slide. Here I'm giving you a very general high level process how we do credential evaluations. Again, please bear in mind that this is very high level. There are a lot of details there. There are a lot of steps there in each boxes. And if there is time at the end, we can talk about it. So first, how we do international academic credential evaluations is first, really, we have to start with the overseas institutions. They are the one who has the repository of the academic documents. Normally, especially post-COVID, those documents are transmitted to us electronically. We made a huge effort after pandemic to make sure that we have digital partnership with overseas institutions. The next step is we verify the academic documents. We verify the authenticity of the academic documents, and that is a very significant step in our operation. If we determine that the documents are authentic, they are not authentic, we stop there. That is the stop. If the documents are fine, we move to the evaluation kind of a stage where we look at the whole degree, we look at the courses, we look at the scope of the program, we look at whether or not like how many courses were theoretical, there were practical or internships and all of that. And then we compare all of that information toward Canadian or US standards. Next, the equivalency is determined. Normally, and I'm going to show you a sample very soon that you will see the kind of the format of our report. The equivalency will determine, because in Canada we have 3 years bachelor's degree. Normally, when we determine that it is a bachelor's degree, in parentheses we will emphasize that whether or not it is a 3 years or 4 years bachelor's degree. We always share the evaluation report with the candidate or with the applicant, because we believe that is a kind of a passport for their settlement process in Canada. And if a candidate selected an employer to receive their report. We send the report directly to the employers. This is a confidence building measure that we send the report directly to the employers. That way, there is a confidence that the report itself is legitimate. Believe it or not, from last September, we have seen a lot of our reports, a lot of our reports are forged. The names are forged, the different elements are forged. So again, when an employer receives the report directly from us, there is that confidence that the report itself is legitimate. Sample evaluation report. I'm terribly sorry if this is not very legible, but as you see, it is the Canadian academic equivalency is highlighted. And then we talk about the other elements of the credential, especially we will indicate the major. And I think that is a point of interest for a lot of employers when they are hiring job applicants, especially like in like say like in medical labs, when they are hiring a biochemist or biologist, they really like to see that area of specialization. This is our basic report. And this is our detailed course-by-course report. This is a kind of a report that professional licensing bodies will require for putting someone through licensure. This is kind of a report that academic institutions at the graduate level will require. Now, really the difference between the previous report is, as you see, we will list all the courses one has fulfilled through the whole program. And then really the real value of this report are those credit columns and grades. Those credits are now, as you see, those are converted. We use a method to convert credits. We use different methods to convert grades. The real value, again, it is those credit hours and the grades. Those are converted Canadian semester credits, and those are converted grades on a 4.0 scale. 50 years in operation, we have a very robust database, really. Like everyone in this sector knows about WES's database, and our database is automated. And not very recently, really, we automated our database in 1997 or 1998. Imagine in 50 years, we collected a lot of data. As I'm highlighting some, we have information on the education system of over 240 countries or jurisdictions. If you are curious to know what is jurisdiction, like for instance, Hong Kong and Macau, for us it is jurisdiction. We have information from over 59,000 institutions. We have information from over 35,000 academic credentials, and about 8,400 grading scales are in this database. To date, in Canada, we have assisted over 2.5 million applicants. As well as we have evaluated over 3.5 million academic credentials. You may be very interested in this tool we have, and it is a it is free tool, by the way. Anyone can go to our website and really test this tool. It is available for HR departments to use it for kind of pre-screening their job applicants. This tool, if you go to our website, by entering some key information about an academic credential from 160 countries, and these are degree level credentials, not diploma level. By entering some key information about an academic credential, you will be able to instantly view our opinion. I have to emphasize, this is our opinion of a Canadian equivalency for an international academic credentials. We know that this database is heavily used by applicants when they prepare for a job interview. If they don't have formal evaluation report from us, they do this exercise and they get a printout and take it to a job interview. just to show to the prospective employer that they have their academic credential from another country is comparable to a Canadian degree. As you see, there is that fine print in the bottom of that output that we are sharing with you, and that fine print is really bringing attention that we are providing this academic equivalency without reviewing any academic documents. That is our disclaimer. This Canadian equivalency is provided without reviewing any documents. Now, about our Gateway program, it is really one of the most unique programs in North America, both in Canada and US. If you recall, I was mentioning that for our standard evaluation process, we receive academic documents directly from the source. Now, we know in the real world, there are so many individuals, especially displaced individuals or refugees, they will not have access to their official academic documents. And for that, WES has designed this pathway that these individuals can get credential evaluation from WES based on the photocopies of the documents they may have in their possession. At this moment, this service is limited to Canada, studied in 7 countries. You see the list of the countries. Again, this is very unique program for those who do not have access. And I have to emphasize, kind of a legitimate access. They don't have legitimate access to their official documents. If you know anyone, any candidate, especially job candidate, job applicant from these countries, refer them to us. There is a limited subsidy on this too. Sometimes they don't pay the full fee to receive this credential evaluation. Thank you so much, and I very much look forward to hear your comments and questions. And now I'm going to pass to my colleague Danielle to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and good morning, everyone. No, you can go back to the last slide. That was not an audio issue. Those were 6 seconds that I paused. 6 seconds is the average time that it takes a recruiter to review a resume. That is it. If you think about it, we spend 30 times longer microwaving popcorn. And it is because research suggests that we are bombarded with 11 million of pieces of information at any given time. However, our brain can only handle 40. So naturally, our brain creates shortcuts so that we can make decisions quickly without overwhelming the brain. And this creates bias that we are unaware of. This is what we know as unconscious bias. Have you ever found yourself as a recruiter saying, I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's just a gut feeling I have about this candidate? I know that I have. And as recruiters and hiring managers, we need circuit breakers. We need these reminders to check on our shortcuts, on our biases. WES has developed in partnership with over 150 employers across the country and many organizations that have proven tested resources over the years, an employer playbook that provides employers with some of those easy to implement tips that can make a difference in the inclusion of immigrants in workplaces. The playbook is meal-sized, which is meant to be a go-to resource as needs arise. Next slide. Yes, thank you. So in this slide, you will see that the employer playbook includes strategies and tools throughout the 4 stages of the employment cycle: recruiting, hiring, onboarding, and integrating. It includes a total of 20 strategies and tools, about 16 checklists and templates. And we also have 3 localized versions for the employer playbook. Those are for the Greater Mountain region, Waterloo region, and Durham regions in Ontario. And these localized versions provide high-level synthesis of community services and resources that are available to employers in those specific communities. So if any of you are currently working in any of the communities I mentioned, I invite you to visit the specific versions of the playbook, because there's a lot of really good work that is available and resources that are available to employers in those regions. It also includes employer testimonials, and I know that many of you will also be those people that could be featured in our playbook. There's a lot of really good work happening across the country. So if there's something that has worked for you in recruiting and having more inclusive recruiting practices, retention practices, please post them in the chat, because we're always looking for those best practices. Also, feel free to share any pain points that you may face as an employer. We will be posting the link to the playbook in the chat. An invitation to browse through the resource and also bookmark it so that you can access it as you need it. In this next slide, you will see a screenshot of what the playbook looks like. So there is a very easy to navigate menu. We did it in a way, and we workshop it in a way that it really provides you with the nuggets of information that you need when you need it. So for example, if you click on recruiting, you will see that automatically will take you to the section that's divided in 3 main categories. So let's say, for example, you click on essentials versus non-essential skills, and there you will have a brief description of what we mean by it, as well as a couple of resources that you can download and access easily on your devices, whether that is mobile or laptop. I wanted to spend some time with all of you just sharing a few of the strategies and tools that are contained in the playbook. One of the first steps to recruiting immigrant talent is learning to write inclusive job descriptions. The playbook talks about how to separate essential from non-essential skills, and it is important to state which ones are not required but considered an asset. And you may wonder, why does this matter specifically for immigrant populations? There's a study that was conducted in 2018 by Harvard Business Review that found that men will apply to a job if they have 60% of the qualifications, whereas women will only apply when they meet 100% of the qualifications. And our experience, and my personal experience, says the same is true for newcomers. So it is very important to highlight what are those essential duties and differentiate them from the non-essential that are the nice to have, but do not directly impact the outcome of the role's effectiveness. An example will be being bilingual in both official languages, essential for the job or not, depending on the region where you're having operations. Another thing that we mentioned in the playbook is to avoid long or complex words, technical terminology, jargon, and acronyms in your job descriptions. If you see as we move into hiring, moving beyond an unintended bias slide, the playbook lists several ways to address bias in recruitment. So about the panel of interviewers and how different views, generations, cultural backgrounds can help reduce bias. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. Also preparing questions in advance and sharing them with another coworker to test them out for clarity. This may help you see whether some of the questions may be indicating a bias or may require to be rephrased to be more culturally sensitive. Also, using a competency-based test to assess hard skill. I know that this is something more common for those of you in the trades and in more technical professions, but there are lots of really good resources that are included in the playbook to support you in assessing the hard skills and not rely only on years of experience as a predictor of performance. In the next slide, we talk a little bit about the importance of diversity in the hiring panel. This is an invitation to consider how diversity in the screening panel may also actually offer different perspective from yours. Often we hear from small employers that this is not an easy thing to do because we're doing everything and finding a few colleagues to interview candidates is just not realistic. There are some suggestions in the playbook about how to go about it. In some communities, employers are actually inviting some external partners to be sitting at the interviews. Sometimes it's a settlement agency that will be joining in the interviews to support with questioning and with identifying some potential gaps and support as well the employer. And diversity, I should say, includes a range of factors, anything from gender, age, life experience, race, cultural background, and more. The playbook also provides a very thorough checklist highlighting the important things to consider when reviewing resumes. The first thing is about the overall readability, spelling, and grammatical errors. Errors in resumes are often viewed as a lack of attention to detail, as a sign of a potential work ethic that the candidate may bring to your company. However, it is important to remember that there are different forms of English. There's the UK, the Canadian, the UK, the US, the Australian, and a person whose first language is not English may not have mastered the language fully, but can still communicate at a level that is acceptable to competently do the job. This is an invitation to not overlook a great candidate because of their perceived lack of English proficiency. Length of time at previous job is another very important consideration. As I said, measuring acquired skills, going beyond the length of time spent at a job and focusing more on the hard skills and assessing those hard skills through other mechanisms. Type of positions held and the title of those positions, also very important consideration when dealing with people that have been working and being internationally. Candidates may not have necessarily held the same job in another organization, but that doesn't mean that may not bring complementary skills that broaden their expertise. Gaps in employment history become very important when we're talking about immigrant job seekers. Oftentimes, those gaps may be perceived as the candidate maybe being unreliable or maybe likely to quit their job soon. However, the reality is that people leave the workforce for a variety of reasons. For example, the visa process for immigrant professionals can be lengthy, and that can be delaying their ability to secure work, an employment gap. Similarly, refugees, people in displacement situations may actually have to be moving from country to country, and so that limits their ability to have a stable job and leaves employment gaps. So all of these things can be addressed during the interview. And finally, an invitation on education. Kevin mentioned how the free-to-use tool that he shared can help employers understand the international education, or at least equivalency, even though it's not a full assessment report endorsed by WES. But also, the playbook makes an invitation to move beyond education only for that is required for the position, and take into consideration both education and work experience. Now, moving on to retention, there's tons of research that shows how attrition levels lower dramatically when candidates are well onboarded. So the 6 first months within a company are critical for retention. And so there are challenges that newcomers, all employees, but specifically newcomer employees may be facing to learn the written and unwritten rules of this new community. So orientation should be designed to set expectations, clarify workplace policies and procedures, and that's why the playbook includes a whole section on mentorship and other peer support model. I wanted to spend a minute just to share a great way to enhance the new employee transition through a buddy system, which is an informal buddy that helps to ensure a successful integration into the workplace. Some interesting tips around selecting individuals that are role models that can lead by example, but also are culturally sensitive, and if possible, who speak the same first language as the new employee. Now that you've hired a new staff member, another critical consideration is how to approach the onboarding. So the next resource that I wanted to share with all of you is what we call the 3 Ps. The the 3 Ps refers to people, performance, and paperwork. This is important across the board for all of the new hires. However, for immigrant employees, it may be particularly important to be intentional about all of these. So people, who should they meet and why? What would the meetings look like? Share all of that with your new recruits, so that they know what to expect, what is to be expected out of these meetings, because you cannot give for granted that this is something that will happen in other workplaces they may have been part of. In terms of performance, so include job shadowing, setting expectations, providing feedback, HR check-ins, coaching, and other training are things that oftentimes are very common in international work settings or in North American work settings, but not necessarily across the globe. And same thing goes for paperwork. So including the orientation, a handbook on policies, resources, all of the forms. I always like to give this example because when I first came to Canada from Spain, which is my home country, I was told that I needed to fill in some forms for my benefits, and I had no idea what benefits were, because that is not a thing in Spain. You get everything covered through government, employment programs, and healthcare system. So to me, it was something new, and even the designation of a beneficiary form was like something I was not aware at all. So very important to highlight all of those things to your newcomer employees. The next slide is talking about, and I think I will wrap up with this one. A very important consideration around what it means to include immigrant talent in the workflows, in the workforce. And this goes beyond recruiting and interviewing and onboarding, because inclusion is equally about helping your existing staff grow with the new talent, as well as about helping the new employee adjust to the team and the new environment. Basically, inclusion is a two-way street, right? It requires leaders to meaningfully prepare the workplace to include and incorporate this talent. And I like to end this presentation with this consideration, because successful retention that cannot solely rely on the ability of the newcomer employee to adapt to the system they're entering. Is about finding a place that is open to change, that is open to learning from the new skills and culture and experiences that the person is bringing into the company. Here you see a resource that is adapted from Hire Immigrants Ottawa's Employer Guide to Integrating Immigrants into the Workplace, an invitation to have a look at it. I feel like many of us have often worked in homogeneous models, but the goal is to move to the diversity model in the workplace, and that is everybody's role, and everybody has a role to play. I will leave it there, but I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation, and I'll turn things over now to Basil for his side of the presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Daniel, for this really helpful presentation. And I've gone through this, the booklet, and I do advise everybody to really have an in-depth look into it. So first, my apologies if there were any background noise. I am currently in an airport, but I will be taking you through a very short presentation and hopefully just leaving a few minutes for some Q&A for any of these presentations. So again, my name is Basil Rumley. I am the Director of Economic Mobility with Jumpstart Refugee Talent. And first, what are we trying to do here? So currently there are a little over 100 million refugees around the world. And in Canada alone, we have right now a little over 1 million job vacancies. And what we're trying to do is really create this win-win situation. As employers look to tap and try to fill some of those gaps, we want them to look at these refugees that are currently stuck in countries where they do not have durable solutions. They're in places, think of a Venezuelan in Colombia or a Syrian in Lebanon. They're in countries where they face a lot of barriers. They're always at risk of deportation and going back to the country where they initially escaped. And this is one program that we're doing in Canada in a very close partnership with our sister organization, Talent Beyond Boundaries. And we collaborate as part of a larger ecosystem. So I'll be focusing on Canada and on Toronto, but there are also some other programs working on in the UK, in the US, and in other European regions, as well as Australia. If any of you is interested in that as well, I can introduce you to some colleagues. And one thing to keep in mind that we have helped relocate a little over 1,000 refugees over the last couple of years to these different destinations. Now, the way that we do our work, we do it through a lot of different facilitative measures, and the program itself is in a very close partnership with IRCC, with Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada. In fact, the program is really IRCC's program, well, with Canada Boundary and Jumpstart Refugee Talent collaborating and helping deliver it in close partnership with the government. So there are a lot of facilitative measures that typically prevent refugees from accessing economic pathways. Keeping in mind, the way that we do it is by accessing, you can see them on the right, some existing provincial pathway. In Ontario, that would be the OINP. But as of this month, the federal government, IRCC, has launched a dedicated federal pathway for just our program, which is again, it's called the Economic Mobility Pathways Pilot, EMPP. And we're very, very excited about it because it has made our life a lot easier. Keeping in mind, candidates, when they relocate to Canada through this program, they actually arrive as permanent residents, as PR. So as an employer, the candidate themselves will not have to be concerned around long-term retention. It's really a great durable solution for both the candidate and the employer. Currently, the processing timeline is taking a little under 6 months, which is incredibly expedited, especially when considering that this is a PR pathway. Candidates also have access to various services, including loans that are issued by different partners that we're working with that do not require any previous credits, and those include windmill microlending and some IRCC options as well. These slides will be shared with you, so you'll be able to view some of those other benefits that they can access through this pathway. Now, the candidate pool that we're working with a pretty large pool right now with over 65,000 candidates that have signed up to our database. They do come from very diverse professional backgrounds. You can see there in skilled trades, we have almost 30,000 candidates, but we have a lot of engineers, almost 6,000 engineers, a lot of tech professionals, and we've really sourced candidates to a variety of occupations. And we've worked with companies of the size of CGI and tech, and in one sector, but we've also worked in construction, we've worked in manufacturing, we've worked in hospitality. And then in the bottom left, you can see some of the regions where these candidates are currently residing and where they're coming from. So a lot of these refugees are coming from the Middle East, from Latin America, East Africa, South and Southeast Asia. Now, the process itself, just like with any economic mobility program, there are multiple steps, but we've cultivated a lot of strong partnerships to really ensure that as an employer, as well as the candidate, you have all the support needed at every single step. So typically we'll have a one-on-one call, and I'm happy to schedule those with all of you after this. And we will go through all the details here. We'll get into an agreement over all the details, and then you would be assigned a recruitment partner. Once we've agreed all that, you would just share with us the job descriptions, as simple as that. Then we will shortlist some candidates based on the job descriptions, based on what you share with us. We will put them forward. We will ensure they're eligible for immigration before we put them forward for you. We will assess them for skill sets, but as well as immigration requirements. From there, we want to ensure that you're able to accommodate your existing hiring process. All these interviews are done virtually. The recruitment partner will help set up these calls as well. And then from there, once you've done these technical assessments, these interviews, you issue job offers, and we move into the third stage with the visa application. Some employers do that in-house, but we really work with one of the largest, in fact, the largest immigration service provider in the world, and that's Fragment, who have seconded, they specialize in corporate immigration, and they've seconded full-time staff on our team to help with that and offer incredibly discounted rates that start at really $1,000 per application, which compares to their typical rate of over $6,000 per application. So Fragment will typically file that visa application, keeping you and the candidate posted on how things are progressing. Once the visa is issued, we transition into the settlement stage. This is where we connect the candidate with settlement, local sponsorship groups, settlement organization. We want to make sure that they have access to all the support needed with things like getting their IDs, enrolling their kids at school, maybe their partner doing ESL school, and so on. And finally, with the post-arrival, we want to make sure that over the next 12 months that you have and the candidate both have all the support that you need. And all these steps really translate into a very high retention rate that we have right now. Globally, it's at 92% for over 12-month retention. And in Canada, that number is actually a little bit higher at closer to 95%. And here are just some of the priority occupations that we've been finding a lot of success and that we're working with. Like I mentioned, a lot of trades, a lot of healthcare opportunities, a lot of hospitality. But by no means are we restricted. We actually are able to bring candidates to virtually most occupations that are available out there. And we can let you know beforehand, based on that job description, on whether this is an occupation that we can work with or not. And I believe, yeah, and that's really it from my end. I tried to make it as short as I can, but happy to take any questions. And I know you might also have some questions for Daniel and Kevin, but I'll take this back to you, Helen.
Thank you, Basil. I would like to thank all our speakers. I know that we're running out of time, but there are some questions already in the chat. So maybe we can take those two questions quickly. One question, Daniel, I think it's directed to you. Based on WES observations, what additional skills and experience do immigrants often possess that employers should consider during the hiring process? If you can quickly comment. And also there is another question here in the chat, probably Basil, if you can take it. This is around negative perceptions surrounding refugees and how we can alter the perception. So if you can quickly comment on that, that would be much appreciated. Daniel, over to you.
I would say even before going there, often newcomers misrepresent their skills and education, but because they've had negative experiences in recruitment processes as they apply for jobs, they feel that they may be overqualified and they can get jobs because they don't have Canadian work experience. So the reality is that sometimes employers often randomly find out that employees they've hired have a whole set of competencies and skills that they had not reported during the interview process, out of fears that they may actually not get the job because it was a more entry-level position and so forth. So to me, this is an invitation to really have an honest conversation during the interview process around the skills and experiences that people are bringing to the table beyond what is written on the resume. And also, once the person has been hired, have conversations. If you have a human resources person in your team, or you're one of them, have one-on-one conversations. If you have some systems for the employee, we do have that at WES where you can actually fill in your own professional experience, so that as other vacancies become available within the organization, they can actually see that there is this hidden talent pool that that is already within the organization, and you can actually promote people to different positions and roles. So open conversation, without assuming that what you see on the resume is the end of the story. There's much more.
Thank you, Daniel. Maybe I can jump on the second question quickly. So yes, the perception about refugees. We always hear this every time we're speaking with employers. The image typically is that a refugee is someone who's living in a tent in a desert somewhere. And that's not true, right? There are some refugees that are living in these statuses, and there are some refugees who are not. I mean, refugee is not really an identity. It's more of a status of where they are right now in life, and it's just an unfortunate status. So a lot of these refugees are, of course, a lot of them are professionals, like I mentioned, in healthcare and engineering and tech and so on. And the idea of it is just all they need is an opportunity to bring their skill sets and come here. A lot of them are just living in these urban settings in major metropolitan cities all around the world. From Ukrainian refugees to Syrian refugees to Venezuelan refugees and so on. Now, once they're hired, yes, we also see them that they can perform in very different ways. Some of them are a lot more confident, and they can ask and demand and showcase their skill sets and look for ways to seek promotion. But a lot of time, and this is where that booklet and that guidelines that Daniel was going after that can become really helpful, is of having maybe some mentorship in the organization itself to help encourage these refugees once they're hired to be able to progress within the organization itself. But I can tell you that they will be able to also showcase their own skills ultimately. And like I always tell people, this is not a charity program. Hiring Refugees is not a charity program. It is a talent program. It just comes with a great story.
Thank you, Basil, and thank you, Daniel. So it's almost 12 o'clock, so I don't want to take more time. But once again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And we will be sharing some more additional resources from WES. We have got your information from Jennifer. So once again, thank you. And maybe Jennifer, if you have a last word to say. Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you to the WES team for sharing that. I know that talent is something that is across the board an issue for our members. So this is very timely, and it's great to see the playbooks that you've shared. Both playbooks that were referenced in the presentation will be were included in the chat, as well as we'll do a follow-up email from WES with that information so that you have their contact information should you have any questions. And then we'll go from there. So everyone have a happy Thursday, have a wonderful long weekend, and thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day.